It's not just the nutrition label, it's the ingredient label too. So, consumers really are looking more at that. And one of the things they're trying to reduce are
So hello, Spot On listeners. I'm back and I brought with you the trend person. This is the person that I listen to or read about every year. Her name is Janet Helm. She's a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and she's also a culinary professional who's really built her career around nutrition communications and marketing. And really, she has been writing about food trends before we knew what the heck food trends were. And, every year around this time, everybody writes what their prediction of food trends is, but I only go to Janet. That's it, because something, that's the only one. You've been doing it for 100,000 years and you're on top of your game. So I only go to the source. So Janet, with that, I want to just welcome you to Spot On.
Thank you, Joan, and thank you for your kind words. I am a little bit obsessed with food trends. You're right about that. And so it is my favorite thing to talk about, to write about. And I think more and more we are interested in what are we going to be eating and drinking in the new year?
It's so funny, Janet, because all of my friends will say that, okay, so what's the food this year? Like, what's the trends going to be? What's the food that year? So they're just going to have to listen to this episode because I'm not spilling the beans here. So before we start, Janet wrote an article in U.S. News and World Report all about this new food trends for the year. And we're going to post this on the Spun On Facebook page. But I want to dive into it, kind of unbox it. But what I love what you do is you don't just go to one report, you comb all of the world to get these trends. So can you tell everybody how do you come up with your list?
Yes, no, a good point. Trend spotting is a bit of an art and a science. So the art part, I'm a very keen observer of food culture, but also the science part, you need data. You need data to really ground it in what's not a fad, what maybe is truly a trend that has some staying power. And there's different ways that we use data and look at data and the sources that I pull from. Some of the reports are really focused on food service because oftentimes trends start at a restaurant. And they may start at fine dining. They may start, in more of a street food. But they often start in restaurants. So there's some great data that looks at menu penetration. What's trending on restaurant menus? What are chefs excited about? So some are food service based. Some data are consumer surveys. Some are looking at new product innovations, like what's been introduced in the last year as far as new products. Some are even using artificial intelligence or just using lots of data from different sources. Maybe what people are searching for, what's trending on TikTok. So it's using different data points to look at some predictions. So it's pulling from a lot of different things. It might be Yelp reviews or what people are ordering on Grubhub. So there's lots of different ways to look at what kind of peaked this year and what's the trajectory going to look like in the coming year. So that's what I tried to do with my article is just what were lots of different people saying, some food service, some consumer interviews, some artificial intelligence, but it's all about predicting, what's going to stay next year and what will we be talking about? What do we want to buy? What are the recipes people want to make? So it's all of those factors coming together.
Right. Something you mentioned in the article, there was like a theme, and when it came to global food, it was, you said in the article, and again, we're going to post this on the Spot On Facebook page, quote unquote, under pressure. What did you mean by that?
Yes, well, there's a group in the UK that I really like a lot as far as I look at global food culture. It's called the Food People. And they've identified as the single major driver of trends in 2023 is under pressure because of global, instability. People are want to control their health more. They want to control their finances. We've had so many, climate emergencies, extreme weather, whether it's floods or fires, so people are really getting serious about climate change. So we're looking at the pressure of that and trying to make more choices, better choices for planetary health, not just personal health, but planetary health now. So all of that is just kind of the pressure that we're all feeling to control our health, to improve the planet, the environment, and our finances. The finances coming into 2023, is a major factor with food inflation and, record food prices, gas prices. So that's absolutely impacting food culture in the coming year.
The food prices is out of control. I mean, the food prices, like I go in and want to buy something and I feel like I'm buying a Mercedes Benz.
Yes.
I don't want to drive it home. I just want to eat it. And it is, I mean, this sticker shock is out of this world. So that's interesting that under pressure, now I understand exactly what you're talking about. And you're right. And something, it kind of feels good that everybody's under pressure. You feel like, is this only me? Am I feeling crazy? But no, we're all in this together.
We're all in it together.
Yes, you got that. So we talk about you had certain categories. And the first one you talk about is the evolution of plant-based foods. And I found what you said to be fascinating. So why don't you share that with us?
Yes. Well, there's a lot of hype about plant-based meat alternatives. And they were like the big, major trend. And some people there was a lot of hype. You wanted to try them. They're suddenly everywhere, but actually they stalled during the last 2 years of the pandemic. Some of the shine has, worn off. And, there's still, this plant-based still is a macro trend, no doubt. Right. But the meat alternative category suffered a bit. One, they're expensive. So coming into 2023, they're a little pricey, but some of them just did not stack up to real meat as far as taste. And then some people were concerned about processing, what are the ingredients, that kind of scrutinizing them a bit more. What are the ingredients? And some even environmental activists are saying, are these even more sustainable than real meat? Right. So, we're still going to see the best ones, continue to be around in the next year. Absolutely. They're not going away, but people are kind of shifting to, let's put the plant more in plant-based meat. And so they're looking at really celebrating the plant and not trying to mimic meat, but celebrating the plant. So whether that's a bean burger instead of something that's trying to taste like ground beef, or maybe it's seaweed, which is we're going to see a lot more plants from the sea in 2023. As well as mushrooms. Mushrooms have always had kind of a meaty taste. So we're going to see a lot more mushrooms too. So plant-based, absolutely macro trend, but it's going to be more about the plant versus always trying to mimic meat. And I think what I also like to see is people are really kind of gravitating to less meat, not meat less always.
Right. And, let me tell you something, that I'm Italian. So, I'll eat anything that's not moving. And I love everything. And people say that, do you eat meat? I said, you're darn straight. I eat meat. I eat chicken. I eat fish. I eat everything. I eat beans. I eat everything. And something, there's something about that when you say plant-based, and even the dietary guidelines, we didn't say it had to be only plant. We just said put more of them on your plate. Yeah. And the protein portion can be anything. And it can be beans. It can be soy, but there's no problem with meat, fish, poultry. And there's a lot of nutrients that bioavailable in animal products, such as iron. And so, like you just said, it's not, meatless, it's just less of the meat and more of the vegetables. And that's where the science really is.
It absolutely is. And that's why I like the term a bit more plant forward. Yes, rather than plant-based, because I think there's a lot of confusion. Does that mean that I need to only eat plants? It's not about only plants, but it's about an abundance of plants or plant-forward meals is what I like to, refer to it rather than just calling it plant-based, where people are confused about that term.
That's right. That's right. I always use plant forward, and I'm using that forever.
Yeah.
The second one you talked about, you kind of alluded to this already. This whole thing about climate friendly crops. I
Mhm.
mean, holy schmoly. I mean, you got drought in California, you got floods in other places. I mean, this is craziness. So what is, how has that affected the farmer, poor farmer? With what Mother Nature is just not nice sometimes.
Absolutely. There's been a whole, kind of movement to more, climate friendly crops that can withstand drought. So they're either, indigenous grains, hybrid grains. There's a grain called Kernza that was developed by the Land Institute in Kansas. That's a perennial grain that's a bit more climate friendly. So we're seeing, farmers change the kind of crops that they grow. But we're also we're going to see a lot more claims related to climate in the coming year. So whether that's regenerative agriculture, so labels on food products, we're going to see more, crops that are grown that really focus on soil health or biodiversity of crops. So we're going to see claims on climate friendly terminology, whether that's net zero or carbon neutral or carbon positive. So there's a lot of different environmental claims because people are interested in trying to make a difference when it comes to the environment.
That's right. And you said in the article something very interesting about ancient grains. And if you go ancient grains like millet, it doesn't maybe need as much water or maybe can sustain high temperatures. So, there's something about going back to what originally was grown.
Absolutely.
So it's helping that, adjust to what's going on in
Fonia with I-corn. There are a lot of
ancient
grains that we're going back to those because they can withstand, some of the, the drought or the, mostly drought, but, a lot going on with the changing of the crops that are more indigenous or ancient grains. Absolutely.
Right. Your third one on your list, and this is interesting because last year we did the whole thing on mocktails and the sober curious, and this is really this cracked me up when you said drinks for a damp lifestyle. So in other words, rather than doing like a dry January, it's a damp January. So can you explain what damp is?
Yeah, again, it's the idea of less meat or instead of meat less. The same thing with alcohol. It's mindful drinking. It's cutting down, not out. So be a little damp. So whether it is drinking in moderation, maybe it's just drinking some on the weekends and not during the week. Or what's being created are these low ABV drinks. So it's not zero proof, which are totally like the no alcohol, but it's low alcohol. So it is, wine now is there's a wine that is a, low alcohol wine. So it's where you're having a little bit, but maybe you're cutting in half what you would drink. So, it's the idea that's, it's not all or nothing. You don't have to be dry. You can be a little damp and still enjoy, a cocktail, not making it a zero proof cocktail, but some of the more low ABV cocktails that are available now. So, and I like that trend that it is, you're able to still fit it in and enjoy it without going completely dry.
So tell us, my listeners, what you mean by ABV.
That is ABV. You'll see that it is alcohol by volume. Is what that stands for. So they're low ABV drinks. And that's very much the trend, just like the trend of flexitarian, like there's hybrid meats. That's not plant-based meat. That's 50% meat, 50% vegetable. So it's a hybrid. So low ABV, alcohol by volume, are low alcohol spirits or low alcohol wine now that you can get.
Right, because I'll tell you what has happened in many years past is the alcohol consumption of some red wines is really, really high. And, you have an ABV that's very high in alcohol and like, woo, one glass of Cabernet and you're like, whoa, that one hit me. So I like this because then you can sip and enjoy and have that damp dinner. I love it.
Yes.
All right. You talked about price, and so you on your list was thrift and frugality. So tell us what people are going to be doing with that in mind.
Well, food prices definitely on people's mind and concern. So looking at how to manage a food budget. And as registered dietitians, we often talk about this, how to eat well on a budget. And so I think that people are looking at how they can still have healthy meals, meals that the family enjoys, but whether they might be, looking at buying in bulk more, or they might be looking at private label. They might be certainly just the idea of cooking more at home will help save money. So people will be looking at cooking from scratch, buying fewer prepared foods, cooking from scratch, and also food waste. Food waste is a big one. So when we think about the waste of money when you have, food spoil in your fridge. So people are going to be looking at ways to reduce food waste. As far as a money saving tactic, and people may be eating less meat because of food prices, but they also still want meat, but it's about how do you cook some of the less expensive cuts of meat? So I think we're going to see a demand for that. What do you do with beef chuck? You're not going to buy filet, but what do you do with beef chuck, pork shoulder, chicken thighs? So I think it's the idea of less expensive meats, but cooking them well, maybe changing how you would normally prepare meat. Yelp identified oxtail as a big trend in the coming year. So a less expensive cut of beef.
What you said, buying in bulk is so spot on. I love chicken thighs. I like them more than chicken breasts, even they're cheaper. But I just went to the store last night, and chicken thighs a pound was $2.79 a pound. But if you bought it in the bulk 3 pound of chicken thighs, so you had chicken thighs for a year, it was $1.79. That's a big difference per pound. So, what the heck, buy the bulk and it's divided up into 3 1-pound bags. Use your freezer for more than ice cubes. And, you just saved $1 a pound. And in these days, that's a heck of a lot of money.
That is. No, the freezer is your friend. So I think anytime that you can buy larger quantities and put some in the freezer for sure. But buying in bulk in certain cases, say nuts, you really have to look at prices. Like some of the big bulk containers in the grocery store may not always be cheaper than some of the prepackaged. So you still have to look at prices, but certainly when it comes to chicken thighs and meat like that, absolutely buy the largest quantity that you can store in your freezer.
Right. You also said in this list was real and recognizable. That was going to be a trend. And you said something, and I've been really reading this a lot about natural sweeteners like dates. I love dates. Dates, to me, oatmeal in the morning with dates and some nuts, I'm in heaven.
Yes.
And so tell us about that. So we're going to be looking more for natural. Tell us that.
Yeah. So I think, people have been tuned in more to the level of processing of foods. There's been a lot written about ultra processed foods. So I think consumers now are really focused on that and the ingredients label. It's not just the nutrition label, it's the ingredient label too. So, consumers really are looking more at that. And one of the things they're trying to reduce are artificial sweeteners. So the natural sweeteners are getting more of, recognized by consumers of something that they want. And Whole Foods always does a trend report, and I think they do a good job. And they've identified dates as the natural sweetener of the year. And more products are sweetened with dates. So whether it's date syrup or date paste. So it's in a lot of beverages now, instead of cane sugar. It's in a lot of like protein bars and lots of, it's even in oatmeal and overnight oats and some products. So you'll see a lot more that's sweetened with date syrup or date paste.
And Janet, you get 2 or 3 for the price of 1, because when you get the dates, it's so sweet, naturally sweet, but you get fiber, you get potassium. So you're sweetening whatever, the oatmeal or the cookie or whatever, with more nutrition.
Yes.
And that it tastes delicious.
Yes, yes, agree. And
That's
also
great.
the idea that people are kind of going back to real butter too, rather than, you
Right.
know, low calorie spreads, they want a little bit of the real butter. So it's the idea of real quality counts, you know, rather than always, you know, the diet version of something.
Right. The next one on your list was, I love this one, great, flavor tourism. So basically you're saying that you're not necessarily going to pack your passport and go globe trotting around the world, but how is it going to affect your plate?
Well, I think that because we have been not able to travel like we've all wanted to the last 2 years, I mean, it's certainly opening up now, but I think it's made people want to explore global cuisines more than ever. So I think that global food, new flavors, street food in particular is going to be really popular in the coming year. And one group, Restaurant Consultants, identified Filipino as the cuisine of the year. And also one of this, and I've seen this certainly pop up all over Instagram, is ube, the Filipino purple sweet potato. That is showing up everywhere. It's so vibrant in color, so it's certainly Instagram friendly, but that's one of their ingredients that they've identified. But I think it's like all types of global cuisine right now, certainly a lot from, you know, Asian cuisines. I think also the interesting thing about kind of the flavor tourism is that we're seeing these interesting mashups of two different cuisines coming together. And it used to be that, you know, the idea of fusion was almost a dirty word. Like, okay, it's got to be authentic. You know, you don't do that. But now, because, you know, particularly Gen Z, I mean, this is a very culturally diverse, you know, generation. And I think the idea of taking the best of your own, you know, culture, you know, and mashing two together, that's okay now to do. And so we're seeing some really interesting combinations of these global mashups. And I think, you know, we're wanting to experience that when we go out to dinner as well, you know, and I think that those are the restaurants that are really thriving, you know, as restaurants are kind of coming back now, you know, surviving the pandemic, and they're kind of roaring back. People want some of those new, you know, culinary experiences.
So you have like the UN on your plate, you know, the
Yes.
United Nations, and we're all sitting around together and fusing and getting along. It tastes great.
Yes.
So the last one on your list, and I love this, was a great way to end your fabulous list, was called Joy and Distraction. So can you tell us what that is?
Yes, because, you know, we have suffered these last 2 years and kind of the under pressure, you know, trend as well, that the idea that we just want food to continue to bring us joy, and joy is going to be a major driver of some of the culinary trends. And what we're seeing is, you know, maybe it's a distraction to some of the things that are other parts of our life that are going on. So some of that may be, you know, nostalgic foods. That's going to continue. That was certainly a big trend during the pandemic, but it's going to continue to be a trend in the coming year. But they might be modern interpretations of our childhood favorites. So, you know, an elevated mac and cheese or PB&J. So nostalgia will continue to be a major driver, but also the idea of, and Yelp really identified this as a trend, that we want really kind of unique, immersive dining experiences when we go out. All part of bringing the joy, or kind of the shared experience with our family and friends. So they identified experimental dining as one of theirs. The increase over 200% of underwater restaurants.
This cracks me up.
You know, or dinner theater, but restaurants are really offering some unique experiences when people now are going back out to eat. They really want something that is, you know, immersive and entertaining. And so it's all part of that joy and distractions.
So when I read your article, again, Janet wrote a wonderful article in U.S. News and World Report, and this underwater dining. I said, I got to Google this. And I looked at some of these restaurants. Unfortunately, a lot of them are in one place, that Maldives. So they're not right around the corner here. But I was watching them and saying like, oh my goodness gracious, you're like, the restaurant is underwater. And the only one I could find that I could probably get to was in Nashville. It was an aquarium, that you were in an aquarium eating. And I said, that's probably the only one I'm going to be able to visit. But I bet, Janet, when I get to that aquarium in Nashville, that restaurant, they are going to have PB&J and dates. I bet dates are going to be on the peanut butter sandwich, right? Because now that's going to be the sweetener underwater or in an aquarium this year as we do that. So anyway, this was so exciting. Again, we're going to put the article that Janet wrote. Her predictions are always spot on. We're going to put this up on the Spot On Facebook page so you can read it. But I can't wait to go into 2023 and do some really joyful and sweet, naturally sweet dining. So with that, Miss Janet, I want to thank you so much for coming on Spot On.
Oh, it's been my pleasure, Joan. Thank you so much for having me.